The city went dark at 2:47 a.m., and Brynn Lawson was 3 miles underground when every monitor in the control room died at once. She swore, grabbing her tablet as emergency lights flickered on. The other engineers were already scrambling, voices overlapping in controlled panic. But Brynn was silent, fingers flying across her screen. The outage pattern made no sense. Substations were dropping in a cascade that defied every load-balancing protocol she'd written herself. This wasn't a surge or a storm. This was surgical. "Lawson, we need you topside," her supervisor barked. "Substation 17 just went critical." She was already moving, tool belt slung over her shoulder, work boots pounding up the maintenance stairs. The elevator was dead. Everything was dead. But something about the failure sequence nagged at her, a rhythm she almost recognized, like a heartbeat coded into the blackout itself. Outside, the city was a stranger. No streetlights, no traffic signals, no glowing windows climbing toward the sky. Just darkness and the distant wail of sirens. Brynn's truck was parked 2 blocks away, but she ran the whole distance, breath misting in the February cold. Substation 17 sat on the eastern edge of the old district, a brutalist concrete box surrounded by chain link and warning signs. She'd been here 100 times, knew every transformer and circuit breaker by heart. The gate was already open, which was wrong. Protocol demanded locks during outages. She pushed through anyway, flashlight cutting through the dark. The substation hummed with a sound that wasn't quite electrical, something lower and older that she felt in her bones. Her tablet showed impossible readings, power flowing in directions that violated physics, currents that shouldn't exist converging on the main transformer like water spiraling down a drain. She needed height, needed to see the connections from above. The access ladder was slick with condensation, but Brynn climbed fast, tool belt jangling against her hip. The roof was flat, scattered with equipment housings and ventilation units, and standing at the center, one hand pressed against the transformer housing, was a man who looked carved from moonlight. White hair fell past his shoulders, catching what little light the stars provided. His skin was pale as bone, and when he turned toward her, his eyes were the color of old silver. He wore clothes that seemed both ancient and timeless. Dark trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled back, revealing forearms corded with muscle and traced with scars that looked like they'd been earned centuries ago. "You shouldn't be here," he said, and his voice was quiet thunder. Brynn's flashlight beam found his face, and he didn't flinch, didn't blink, just watched her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and measured. "This is my substation," she said, keeping her voice level. "You're the one trespassing." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "Your substation. How charmingly mortal." That's when she noticed his hand, still pressed against the transformer, and the way power was flowing through him. Not electrocuting him, flowing through him like he was part of the circuit itself. "What are you doing to my grid?" "Saving it," he said simply. "And what lies beneath it?" He lifted his hand, and immediately the transformer began to whine, pitch climbing toward dangerous. Brynn lunged forward, not thinking, just moving on instinct. She slapped her own palm against the housing, feeling the current jump against her skin, and yanked the manual override lever with her other hand. The whine dropped, stabilized. She turned to find him staring at her, something like surprise in those silver eyes. "You felt that," he said, not a question. "I feel everything in this system," Brynn replied. "It's my job. Now tell me what the hell you are and why you're feeding power into my transformer like it's a battery." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "My name is Dorian Ossendorf. I am king of the court of deepening night, and your city's electrical grid is the only thing preventing my people from being exposed to the authorities who would destroy us." Brynn blinked, processed, looked at him again, really looked, taking in the inhuman stillness of his posture, the way his chest didn't rise and fall with breath, the faint luminescence of his skin. "Vampire," she said. "Yes. And you're using my power grid to—" "What? Hide?" "To survive." He moved then, crossing the distance between them with speed that left after images. He stopped just close enough that she could see the fine details of his face. The sharp cut of his cheekbones, the elegant line of his jaw, the way his pupils contracted like a cat's. The The tunnels beneath this city have housed my court for 200 years. The electromagnetic interference from your transit lines, your power conduits, your endless human machinery, it masks our presence from detection. But someone is sabotaging the grid, creating failures that will force your engineers deeper into spaces they should never find. The outage pattern, Brynn murmured, mind racing. It's not random. It's designed to look like infrastructure failure, but it's too perfect, too targeted. Yes, Dorian's voice carried approval. You see what others miss. She pulled out her tablet, brought up the Cascade map. Here and here. These substations all feed into the old transit hub, the one they condemned 15 years ago. If those fail completely, the city will have to excavate to rebuild the trunk lines. And they will find my court, my people. His hand closed over hers on the tablet, cold as winter. I cannot allow that. Brynn met his eyes. Then we need to stabilize the system, reroute power around the compromised nodes, make the grid resilient enough that even sabotage can't force a total rebuild. You would help me? You don't know me, don't know what I am beyond the obvious. I know my grid, she said, and I know someone's fucking with it for reasons that have nothing to do with keeping people's lights on. That pisses me off. The corner of his mouth lifted, almost a smile. You are unexpected. I get that a lot. She pulled her hand free, started making notes. I need access to the tunnel systems, the real schematics, not the sanitized versions the city keeps on file. Come with me. Now? Do you have somewhere else to be, Brynn Lawson? The use of her name should have felt invasive, but somehow it didn't. Somehow it felt like recognition. Fine, she said, but if this is some elaborate way to murder me, I'm going to be really annoyed. I have no intention of harming you. Dorian turned toward the roof's edge, though I will need to carry you. The entrance is unconventional. Before she could protest, he'd swept her into his arms, one hand beneath her knees, the other supporting her back. She had time to notice how solid he felt, how strong, and then he was moving. They dropped off the roof into darkness, and Brynn swallowed a yell. But instead of falling, they were gliding, Dorian's coat streaming behind them like wings. Wind whipped her hair as they descended into a narrow alley, landing silent as snow on concrete. You can fly, she said, breathless. Glide, he corrected. True flight is beyond most of our kind. Most? The eldest can manage it. I'm not quite that ancient. He set her down gently, steadied her when she swayed. This way. The alley ended in a loading dock that looked abandoned, but Dorian pressed his palm against a rust-streaked door, and it swung inward, revealing stairs that descended into electric darkness. Stay close, he said. My court is protective of their king. They will not harm you while you're with me, but wary strangers have been killed for less than curiosity. Comforting, Brynn muttered, but she followed him down. The stairs went deeper than should have been possible, cutting through layers of city infrastructure she recognized from her schematics. Old water mains, abandoned subway tunnels, steam pipes from the previous century's heating systems, and then they crossed a threshold into something else entirely. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber lit by what looked like captured lightning, arcs of electricity dancing between copper spires that reached toward a ceiling lost in shadow. The walls were dressed stone, carved with patterns that predated the city above, and everywhere, moving through the flickering light, were figures with white skin and white hair, dressed in clothes that spanned centuries. They turned as one when Dorian entered, and their eyes were all the same shade of silver. My king, one of them said, a woman in a gown that might have been from the 1800s. You bring a human here? I bring an engineer, Dorian corrected, one who can help us survive what is coming. Another vampire stepped forward, male, wearing modern clothes, but carrying himself like a soldier from some ancient war. The grid fails because Constantine wills it so. A human cannot stop him. Constantine, Brynn echoed. Who's that? My rival, Dorian said quietly. A vampire who believes our kind should rule openly, who sees hiding as weakness. He thinks if he can force the human authorities to discover us, it will trigger a war we can win. Can you? Brynn asked. Win? Perhaps? Survive? No. Dorian turned to face his court, and his voice carried power that made the air vibrate. War with humanity would end in our extinction. They are many, we are few. Their technology advances while we remain bound to old strengths. Constantine is a fool, and his sabotage threatens us all. The woman in the old gown inclined her head. Then what would you have us do, my king? Trust me, and trust her. Dorian gestured to Brynn. Show her the conduit chamber. Give her access to our infrastructure. Let her work. There was muttering, resistance in silver eyes and skeptical expressions, but eventually the crowd parted. The soldier vampire led them deeper, through tunnels that hummed with stolen electricity, until they reached a chamber that stole Brynn's breath. It was a cathedral of copper and crystal, transformers and capacitors arranged in configurations she'd never seen, cables thick as her arm carrying currents that should have melted them instantly. And at the center, a device that looked like it belonged in a museum of impossible things, all vacuum tubes and analog gauges, spinning dials and mercury switches. "What is this?" she whispered. "Our heart," Dorian said, "built over decades piece by piece, stealing power from your world to sustain ours. It regulates temperature, provides light, masks our electromagnetic signature from your satellites and sensors." Brynn approached the device reverently, pulled out her tablet, started scanning. The readings were insane. Power consumption off the charts, but distributed so cleverly across the grid that it looked like normal losses, expected inefficiency. "This is beautiful," she said. "This is dying," Dorian corrected. "Constantine's sabotage has destabilized the feed lines. We're consuming more power to maintain basic functions, which creates more anomalies, which attracts more attention. It's a death spiral." She could see it in the data, the slow collapse. How long? Days, perhaps a week. And if the grid forces excavation? Sunlight reaches these tunnels for the first time in centuries. My people burn. Those who survive scatter or are captured by your government. Either way, the court of deepening night ends. Brynn set down her tablet, turned to face him. "I need 12 hours, access to your systems and mine, and coffee. Lots of coffee." Dorian inclined his head. "Anything you require." The soldier vampire, his name was Lucian, she learned, brought her a chair that looked like it came from a palace, and coffee in a porcelain cup so fine she could see light through it. She barely noticed, already lost in the work. The sabotage was elegant, she had to admit. Constantine, whoever he was, understood systems. He'd identified the exact nodes whose failure would create cascading problems without triggering immediate emergency response. The kind of degradation that looked like aging infrastructure that would lead to scheduled repairs, excavation, discovery. But he hadn't accounted for someone who knew the grid better than her own heartbeat. Brynn's fingers flew across her tablet, building models, running simulations. She could reroute power through secondary conduits, balance loads in ways the automated systems would never attempt. It would violate half a dozen safety protocols and probably get her fired if anyone ever audited the changes. But it would work. "Here," she said, showing Dorian her screen. "If we shift the primary draw to these substations, create a false load signature that mimics a new industrial park, we can mask the increased consumption. And if we install buffer capacitors here, here, and here, we can stabilize the fluctuations that are attracting attention." He studied the screen, though she suspected he understood maybe half of what he was seeing. "This will prevent excavation? This will make excavation unnecessary. The grid will look stable, even optimized. Your power draw will disappear into normal variants. And Constantine's sabotage becomes irrelevant. He can keep breaking things, but the system will route around the damage automatically. It'll be like punching water." Dorian was quiet for a long moment, silver eyes on her face instead of the screen. "You've been working on this city's infrastructure for how long?" 6 years since I got my full engineering certification. 12 if you count internships and apprenticeships. And in one night, you've accomplished what my court couldn't manage in months." Brynn shrugged. "You were thinking like vampires, ancient, powerful, but analog. I'm thinking digital, adaptive systems, machine learning, responsive networks." "You are remarkable," he said softly. Heat crept up her neck. "I'm practical. There's a difference." "Is there?" He reached out slowly enough that she could pull away and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were cold but gentle. I have lived for 3 centuries, Brynn Lawson. I have known warriors and scholars, artists and kings, but I have never met anyone who looks at a failing power grid and sees poetry. It's not poetry. It's just connection. Energy flowing, systems communicating, everything interdependent. It's beautiful because it works. Like a court, Dorian murmured, like a kingdom held together by trust and necessity. She met his eyes. Is that what you have? Trust? I have loyalty, I have tradition, but trust? He glanced at the gathered vampires, some watching openly, others pretending not to listen. That is harder won. Constantine offers them pride. I offer them survival. Survival is better than pride if you're dead, Brynn pointed out. His laugh was quiet, genuine. I find I like the way you think. Good. Because I'm going to need your help to implement this. I can redesign the system, but I can't physically access half these nodes without raising questions. Your people can move through the city unseen, can reach places I can't. You want my court to become your technicians? I want them to become my hands. I'll tell them where to go, what to install, how to configure it. They do the field work. Dorian turned to address his people. You heard her. Who will volunteer? Every hand rose. The work began immediately. Brynn divided the court into teams, sent them to different substations with carefully written instructions and equipment sheet requisitioned from the city's emergency stockpiles. Dorian stayed with her, a constant presence at her shoulder, occasionally asking questions that showed he understood more than she'd expected. You were human once, she said during a quiet moment, watching her tablet as teams reported in. What did you do? Before? I was a builder, Dorian said. Bridges mostly. Architecture of connection. That's why you understand this. That's why I chose you. He met her gaze. The moment I saw you on that roof, I knew. You think like I think. See patterns, systems, the elegant logic of structures that serve a purpose. And you fell for that? The words slipped out before she could stop them. I mean, yes, he said simply. I fell for that. For you. In the space of a heartbeat I no longer possess, I fell. Brynn's throat went tight. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you climbed to a roof in the middle of a crisis to understand a problem no one else could see. I know you looked at a vampire and saw an engineering challenge instead of a monster. I know you're risking your career to save people who aren't even your species. You're still people, she said. Maybe not human, but people. And someone's trying to kill you for political reasons. That's not okay in any world. In my world, it's tradition. The strong replace the weak. Then your tradition is stupid. Dorian's smile was bright as lightning. Yes, it is, and I have been trying to change it for a century with little success. Perhaps what we needed all along was an outside perspective. Her tablet chimed. Team 3 reporting successful installation at Substation 8. Team 5 encountering resistance at Substation 12. Not technical, but another vampire, presumably one of Constantine's people. Tell them to withdraw, Dorian said immediately, reading over her shoulder. I'll handle it. You're going to fight? I'm going to talk. Violence is Constantine's language, not mine. He touched her shoulder, brief and careful. Continue coordinating. I'll return shortly. He was gone in a blur of motion, coat streaming behind him. Brynn stared at the empty space he'd occupied, feeling oddly bereft, then forced her attention back to the tablet. Over the next hours, the grid began to transform. Node by node, capacitor by capacitor, her redesign took shape. Power flows smoothed out, loads balanced, the whole system settling into a new equilibrium that hummed with stability. And the tunnel court disappeared from the city's electrical awareness, masked behind false signatures and clever routing. Dorian returned near dawn, coat torn and a cut healing slowly on his cheekbone. Constantine? Brynn asked. Knows I'm aware of his sabotage, knows I've taken countermeasures. Dorian paused, choosing words carefully. Escalating. Meaning? Meaning he'll try something more direct. An attack on the court itself, perhaps, or on you. Brynn's hand stilled on her tablet. Why me? Because you're the architect of his failure, because you matter to me, and he knows it. Dorian crouched beside her chair, bringing their eyes level. I can protect you, but I need you to trust me. Will you? She should have been afraid, should have run. Instead, she reached out and touched the cut on his face, watched it finish healing beneath her fingertips. "I trust you," she said. "Don't make me regret it." Never. The last team reported in as true dawn approached. All nodes installed, all systems operational. Brynn ran a final diagnostic, watched the numbers align into beautiful, stable patterns. "It's done," she whispered. "The grid is secure. Your court is hidden." "You're exhausted," Dorian observed. "When did you last sleep?" She tried to remember, couldn't. "What day is it?" "Thursday." "Then Tuesday." His expression shifted into something between concern and exasperation. "You need rest." "I need to see it," she said, pushing to her feet. The world swayed, and Dorian caught her, steady as stone. "Need to see that it's working, from above. I've been underground for, I don't even know how long. 8 hours. Feels like days." Dorian studied her face, and something in his expression softened. "You want to see the city?" "I want to see something beautiful," Brynn admitted. "I've been staring at schematics and failure cascades and political bullshit for so long, I forget what I'm actually protecting. Remind me." "Please." For a moment, he simply looked at her. Then, "Come with me." He swept her into his arms again, and this time she didn't protest, just wrapped her arms around his neck and held on. They moved through the tunnels at speed, past the gathered court, past Lucian's approving nod and the whispers that followed in their wake. Up the stairs, into the alley, and then Dorian was climbing, hands and feet finding purchase on the brick wall like a spider, impossibly fast. They reached the roof of a building that had to be 30 stories tall, and he set her down gently on the edge. The city spread before them, lights returning block by block as the grid stabilized. Dawn was a threat on the eastern horizon, pale gold bleeding into purple sky. "It's beautiful," Brynn breathed. "You're beautiful," Dorian countered. "The city is merely lit." She laughed, exhausted and giddy. "That's terrible. You're terrible at compliments." "I've been told." He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she felt the cold radiating from his skin. "But I mean it. I've seen cities rise and fall, Brynn. I've watched centuries turn like pages in a book. And I have never seen anything as lovely as you, silhouetted against the dawn, saving my people with nothing but brilliance and determination. Now you're just trying to make me cry. Is it working?" "Maybe." She wiped at her eyes, frustrated by the tears that came anyway. "I'm just tired. And relieved, and scared because Constantine is still out there, and this isn't over. And Brynn." Dorian turned her to face him, hands gentle on her shoulders. "What would you like? Right now, in this moment, if you could have anything." She looked at him, at the silver eyes and white hair, and the face that seemed carved from moonlight and longing. At the vampire king who'd trusted her with his people's survival, who'd called her brilliant, who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for centuries. "Take me somewhere beautiful," she whispered. Dorian smiled, and it transformed his face into something radiant. "Hold tight." He lifted her, and then they were moving, gliding off the building's edge into open air. Brynn gasped, clutching at his shoulders, but Dorian held her secure, one arm beneath her knees, the other wrapped around her back. They soared over the sleeping city, between towers of glass and steel, above streets where early traffic was beginning to stir. The wind was cold and clean, smelling of winter and electricity and the promise of snow. Below, her grid hummed with power, stable and strong, a web of light holding the darkness at bay. "This is impossible," she said, breathless. "This is flight," Dorian corrected. "Or close enough." "You said you couldn't fly." "I said true flight was beyond most of our kind. I never said I couldn't try." They climbed higher until the buildings fell away and the city became a map of light beneath them. Brynn could see the whole grid from up here, could trace the power lines and substations, and the dark ribbon of the river cutting through it all. "There," she said, pointing. "That's substation 17, where we met." "The beginning of everything," Dorian murmured. "And there's the old transit hub, your court. My home, which you saved." "We saved it," she corrected. "Your people did the work. You gave us the plan, the hope." He adjusted his grip, holding her closer. "Look east." She turned her head and saw the sun, a sliver of gold cresting the horizon. Dorian immediately banked away, angling them back toward the west, toward shadow. Does it hurt? She asked. The sun? Like fire. Like dying slowly. His voice was matter-of-fact. Which is why dawn is our ending and dusk our beginning. I'm sorry. Don't be. Every curse carries a gift. We have darkness and eternity and each other. He met her eyes. And now I have you. You don't have me. I'm not. We're not, aren't we? He spoke quietly, but his words carried weight. You've seen my world, Brynn. Met my people. Risked everything to protect us. And I have shown you more of myself in one night than I've shown anyone in decades. If that isn't the beginning of something, I don't know what is. Her heart hammered against her ribs. I'm human. Mortal. I'll age and die and you'll still be here, looking exactly like this. And that's not fair to either of us. Life is not fair. Death is not fair. Love is the least fair of all. Dorian's expression turned serious. But it's also the only thing that makes eternity bearable. I would rather have you for your mortal lifetime than spend another century alone. That's a terrible deal for you. That's my choice to make. They were descending now, gliding back toward the rooftops as the sun climbed higher. Brynn could feel exhaustion dragging at her, the adrenaline of the night finally fading. I need to sleep, she admitted, and you need to get underground before you catch fire. Practical even now, Dorian said, but he was smiling. There's a safe house nearby, windowless, secure. You can rest there. With you, if you wish, or I can leave you in peace. She considered, weighing fear against fascination, caution against the growing certainty that this strange, impossible connection was real. Stay, she said finally. I don't want to be alone right now. Then you won't be? He landed on a building she recognized, one of the old warehouses converted to luxury lofts, the kind of place she could never afford. But Dorian moved through it like he owned the place, which he probably did, entering a penthouse unit that was all dark wood and darker shadows. The bedroom had no windows, just soft lighting and a bed that looked criminally comfortable. Brynn collapsed onto it, fully clothed, barely managing to kick off her boots. Dorian sat on the edge of the mattress, reached out to brush hair from her face. Sleep. I'll watch over you. You don't sleep? Not as you do. But I can rest, and I can keep you safe. She wanted to argue, to say she didn't need protection, but her eyes were already closing, her body surrendering to exhaustion. Dorian? Yes? This is crazy. Yes, he agreed. I think I'm falling for you anyway. His hand stilled in her hair. Then we're falling together. She slept. When she woke, it was to darkness and the smell of coffee. Brynn sat up, disoriented, finding Dorian in a chair by the door, reading a book that looked older than the city. What time is it? She asked. 6 in the evening. You slept for 10 hours. 10 shit, my job. They'll be looking for me. I took the liberty of sending a message from your phone. Told your supervisor you were following up on some anomalies and would report in tomorrow. He set down the book. I hope that was acceptable. You hacked my phone. I observed you enter the password last night. It's hardly hacking. Brynn laughed despite herself. Okay, fine, thank you. There's food in the kitchen, human food. I had some delivered. She found her way to the kitchen, discovered an absurd spread of takeout containers from half a dozen restaurants. Dorian had apparently ordered one of everything, unsure what she'd want. He joined her as she ate, sitting across the table, just watching. This is weird, she said around a mouthful of pad thai. You watching me eat? I'm memorizing you. The way you move, the expressions you make. I want to remember this. Why? I'm not going anywhere. Aren't you? His voice was careful. Once the crisis has passed, once Constantine is dealt with, you'll return to your life above ground, your job, your apartment, your world, and I'll remain below, in the darkness. Brynn set down her fork. Is that what you want? What I want is irrelevant. I am king of a vampire court. You are a human engineer. Our worlds intersect only in crisis. That's bullshit. She stood, came around the table to face him. You said yourself we're falling together. You don't get to take that back just because it's complicated. Complicated doesn't begin to describe it. You would have to give up everything, sunlight, mortality, your humanity itself, to truly be part of my world. I'm not talking about becoming a vampire. I'm talking about being with you. However that works. Dorian rose to his feet, and his expression was tortured. You deserve more than stolen hours in the dark, more than a lover who can never stand beside you in daylight. Maybe I get to decide what I deserve, Brynn shot back. Maybe I'm tired of people telling me what's realistic, what's practical, what makes sense. Maybe for once I want something just because it feels right. And I feel right. You feel like the first interesting thing that's happened to me in years, like a puzzle I want to solve, like someone who actually sees me, not just the work I do. She reached up, cupped his cold face in her warm hands. So yeah, you feel right. He kissed her. It was soft at first, careful, like he was afraid she'd break. But when she pressed closer, fingers tangling in his white hair, the kiss deepened into something desperate. His hands found her waist, pulled her flush against him, and Brynn gasped at the feel of him, all solid muscle and inhuman strength held in perfect check. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, or at least she was Dorian, pressed his forehead to hers. "This is madness," he whispered. "Good," Brynn replied. "I'm tired of sanity." Her phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She pulled it out, saw a message from her supervisor. "Grid stable. Whatever you did, it worked. Take tomorrow off. You earned it." "See," she said, showing Dorian. "Even the universe is giving us permission. The universe has a questionable sense of humor. The universe brought me to a substation roof at the exact moment you needed an engineer. I'm going to trust it." Dorian's expression softened into something that might have been hope. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to try this. You and me. However it works. I'll keep my job, my apartment, my human life, but I'll also have you, and your court, and stolen hours in the dark," she smiled. "It's not traditional, but when has anything about us been traditional?" "You're certain?" "I'm terrified, but yeah, I'm certain." He kissed her again, slower this time, and Brynn felt the world shift into a new configuration, a new system, balanced and strange and somehow perfect. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was an emergency alert. All engineers report immediately. Major incident at City Hall. They broke apart and Dorian was already moving, grabbing his coat. "Constantine, how do you know?" "Because City Hall sits directly above the main chamber of my court. If he can't expose us through grid failure, he'll do it through direct assault." Brynn was already running for the door, tool belt forgotten but tablet in hand. "How many vampires does he have?" "Enough to be a problem." They moved through the city at inhuman speed, Dorian carrying her in great leaping bounds across rooftops, dropping into alleys, racing through the night. City Hall loomed ahead, all classical columns and modern glass, and beneath it, the tunnels, Brynn said. "He's going to breach them from below, isn't he? Force an excavation by creating a sinkhole or structural collapse." "Yes." "Then we need to evacuate your court. Get them out before—" "They won't leave. It's their home. They'll fight." "Against what? Sunlight piped into the tunnels? Constantine doesn't need to win a battle. He just needs to expose you." Dorian's expression turned grim. "Then we stop him before he can." They entered through a maintenance access, descended into the subterranean levels beneath City Hall. Brynn could hear fighting before they saw it, the clash of bodies, snarls that didn't sound human, the crackle of electricity arcing through the air. The tunnel chamber was chaos. Dorian's court faced off against another group of vampires, these ones dressed in military-style gear, moving with coordinated precision. And in the center of it all, standing on the great copper device that powered the court, was a vampire who could only be Constantine. He was taller than Dorian, broader, with white hair cropped short and scars crisscrossing his pale face. He wore modern tactical gear and held what looked like a modified industrial drill, its bit already chewing into the device's housing. "Brother," he called when he saw Dorian, "come to watch your precious hiding place die?" "Brother?" Brynn whispered. "By blood, centuries ago, not by choice." Dorian stepped forward, and vampires on both sides fell silent. "Constantine, stop this." "Why? So we can cower in darkness another century? So we can steal power and scraps of life from the humans who walk above us, ignorant of our existence? Constantine's laugh was harsh. I offer our people pride. You offer them shame. I offer them survival. Survival isn't living. The drill bit deeper, and the device began to whine. I will tear this machine apart. The tunnels will collapse. The humans will excavate. And when they find us, we will show them what true power looks like. You'll kill everyone in this room, your own people included. A worthy sacrifice for freedom. Dorian moved faster than Brynn's eyes could track, crossing the distance to the device in a blur. But Constantine was ready, catching his brother's charge and hurling him back into the tunnel wall hard enough to crack stone. Brynn's mind raced. The device was failing, power surging in uncontrolled spikes. If it detonated, the explosion would bring down half of City Hall. Dozens dead, possibly hundreds. She needed to shut it down, but safely, in a way that wouldn't destroy the court's masking capabilities. She ran to the device, ignoring the fighting vampires, and pulled up schematics on her tablet. The drill had punctured the main capacitor bank, creating a feedback loop. If she could reroute power through the secondary systems, bleed off the excess. "What are you doing?" Constantine demanded, suddenly in front of her. "You're the human, the engineer." "I'm the engineer who's about to save your ungrateful ass," Brynn snapped, fingers flying across her tablet. "You want exposure? Fine. But I'm not letting you murder innocent people to get it." "Innocent?" he laughed. "There's no such thing. Not among humans, not among our kind." "Then what does that make you?" His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. "Necessary." Brynn couldn't breathe, couldn't think, vision tunneling. But her tablet was still in her hand, and with the last of her consciousness, she executed the shutdown sequence. The device died. All the lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Constantine's grip loosened in surprise. Brynn fell, gasping, and then Dorian was there, tearing his brother away from her with a snarl that echoed through the tunnels. They fought in the dark, two white-haired shadows moving too fast to follow. Brynn heard impacts, felt the air pressure change with near misses. Her tablet screen provided the only light, and by its glow she saw Dorian drive Constantine back, step by step, toward the chamber's entrance. "Your human witch has doomed us both," Constantine spat. "Without the device, this court cannot remain hidden. The city's censors will find us within days." "Then we'll find another way," Dorian said. "Without you." He struck once, precisely, and Constantine dropped. Not dead vampires were nearly impossible to kill, but unconscious. Lucian and others of Dorian's court moved forward, securing Constantine with chains that looked like they'd been forged for exactly this purpose. "Take him to the deep cells," Dorian ordered. "He'll be tried before the full court tomorrow night." They dragged Constantine away, and Dorian turned to Brynn, still kneeling beside the ruined device. "Are you hurt?" She touched her throat, felt bruises forming. "I'll live. The device won't. I had to kill it to prevent a catastrophic failure." "I know. You saved us." "I saved City Hall. Saving you is going to take more work." Dorian crouched beside her. "What do you need?" "Time, resources, and about 6 miracles." She pulled up new schematics, started sketching. The device was analog, physical, a fixed point of failure. We need to go distributed. Smaller nodes throughout the tunnel system, each one handling a fraction of the load, all networked together. If one fails, the others compensate. "Can you build such a thing?" "I can design it. Your court will have to build it, and we'll need to do it before the city's next deep sensor sweep, which according to my schedule is in 72 hours. "Then we have 72 hours. She met his eyes. "You know this means I'm basically moving in, right? Living down here, working around the clock. No sunlight, no surface time, just me and a bunch of vampires and an impossible deadline." "Is that acceptable to you?" Brynn looked around the darkened chamber, at the vampires gathering to hear what would happen next, at Dorian's silver eyes filled with hope and fear, and something that might have been love. "Yeah," she said, "it's acceptable." The next 3 days blurred together into a haze of work and wonder. Brynn divided her time between her tablet and the tunnel system, designing nodes and teaching vampires how to install them. They were surprisingly good students, their centuries of existence giving them patience and precision she rarely found in human crews. Dorian was everywhere, supporting her work, managing his court, and somehow finding time to bring her coffee and food at regular intervals. He didn't sleep, didn't tire, just watched her with those silver eyes and occasionally asked questions that showed he was beginning to understand the systems she was building. It's like a body, he said during one late-night work session. Each node is an organ, and the network is the circulatory system. Exactly. Brynn looked up from her soldering. You get it. I had a good teacher. On the second day, Constantine was tried before the full court. Brynn attended, standing beside Dorian as witnesses recounted the sabotage, the attack, the attempt on her life. The verdict was unanimous: exile. Constantine would be stripped of his rank, his possessions, and his place in the court, then sent into the world alone. Death would be kinder, he said as they led him away. Then it's fortunate I'm not feeling kind, Dorian replied. Afterward, in the quiet of Dorian's private chamber, a room carved from bedrock and furnished with centuries of collected beauty, Brynn asked the question that had been nagging at her. Why didn't you kill him? Because killing doesn't end cycles of violence. It perpetuates them. Dorian poured wine from a bottle that looked older than America. Constantine's followers needed to see him defeated and judged, not martyred. Exile makes him powerless. Death would make him a symbol. You're a better king than I'd be. You'd be an excellent queen. She laughed. I'm not queen material. No, you're engineer material, which is better. He handed her a glass. You build things that last. I merely maintain them. You built this court, this community. That's not nothing. They drank in comfortable silence, and Brynn felt some of her exhaustion ease. The work was progressing well. The distributed network was nearly complete. In another day, maybe two, the court would be secure again. And then what? As if reading her mind, Dorian said, When this is finished, you'll return to your life. I won't keep you here. What if I want to stay? Do you? Brynn considered. The tunnels were beautiful in their way, and the vampires had stopped seeing her as a strange human and started treating her as one of their own. But she missed sunlight, missed the surface world, her apartment, her normal life. I want both, she admitted. I want to keep my job, my place above ground. But I also want this, want you, want to be part of something bigger than just maintaining infrastructure. Then have both. Dorian set down his glass, took her hands in his cold ones. Be our liaison, the bridge between our world and yours. You've already proven you can navigate both. Make it official. The city doesn't know you exist. The city doesn't, but certain individuals do. How do you think we've survived this long? We have arrangements, understandings, but they've always been tenuous, reliant on intermediaries who don't truly understand either world. You could change that. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a role, a purpose, and a place beside me, however you choose to define that. Brynn's heart raced. That's a lot of responsibility. You've been carrying the responsibility of an entire city's power grid for years. This is simply expanding your jurisdiction. She laughed, incredulous and excited and terrified all at once. When you put it that way, is that a yes? It's a, let me think about it while I finish saving your court and then we'll talk. I can accept those terms. He kissed her, and Brynn lost herself in the feeling of him, cold and constant, and somehow exactly what she needed. On the third day, they installed the final node. Brynn stood in the main chamber, now lit by the soft glow of distributed power sources, and ran a full systems diagnostic. All nodes green, power consumption stable and masked, electromagnetic signature dispersed and undetectable. It works, she said, disbelieving. Lucian clapped her on the shoulder hard enough to stagger her. You doubt it? I always doubt until I see results. That's engineering. The court gathered to celebrate, and Brynn found herself surrounded by vampires toasting her with wine and blood. They kept the blood discreet, for which she was grateful and thanking her in languages she didn't speak, but whose meaning was clear. Dorian found her in the crowd, pulled her aside to a quieter tunnel. You did it, he said. We did it. Your people are amazing. They're your people too now, if you want them. She looked back toward the celebration, at faces that had become familiar over 3 intense days, at Lucian teaching a younger vampire some combat technique, at the woman in the old gown, whose name was Seraphine, laughing at something, at the community Dorian had built and protected for centuries. I want them, she said, and I want the role you offered, liaison, bridge builder. Whatever you want to call it. Dorian's smile was radiant. You're certain? I'm terrified and excited and completely out of my depth, but yeah, I'm certain. Then there's one more thing you need to see. He led her deeper into the tunnels, past the court's living areas, into regions that felt older, more primal. Eventually, they emerged into a chamber that took her breath away. It was a control room, but unlike anything she'd ever seen. Banks of monitors showing feeds from across the city, maps of infrastructure, both human and vampire, communication systems that looked like they bridged centuries of technology. And in the center, a chair that was clearly meant for someone in command. This was built decades ago, Dorian explained, for exactly the role you're taking on. But we've never had anyone worthy of filling it. Until now. Brynn approached the chair, ran her hand over its surface. The monitors flickered to life at her touch, responding to her presence. It's keyed to you, Dorian said. I had it configured yesterday while you were sleeping. All our systems, all our knowledge at your fingertips. You can manage the interface between our worlds from here. This is insane. This is necessary, and you're perfect for it. She sat down, and the chair fit like it had been made for her. Screens arrayed themselves in an arc, data flowing across them in patterns she could almost read. It would take time to master this system, to truly understand the depths of what she was being given access to. But time was something she had. Okay, she said, looking up at Dorian. I'm in, officially, completely, insanely in. He moved behind the chair, leaned down to whisper in her ear. Then welcome to the court of deepening night, Brynn Lawson, our engineer, our liaison, our treasure. Don't get sappy on me. Too late, she turned in the chair, pulled him down for a kiss that was promise and sealing both. When they broke apart, Dorian's expression was soft with something she was beginning to recognize as love. What now? She asked. Now you go home. Get actual rest in your own bed. Report to your supervisor tomorrow and tell him the grid is stable. Live your human life. And when do I come back? Whenever you want. You have access. You have a place here. You have me. What about you and me, specifically? Dorian considered. I would court you properly. Take you to places in this city you've never seen. Show you the world through centuries of eyes. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, we'll discuss the future. The vampire future? Immortality and blood and all that? Only if you choose it. I'll take you however you come, for however long we have. That's a terrible deal for you. You keep saying that. I keep disagreeing. Brynn stood, faced him fully. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to be terrible at vampire politics and probably offend half your court with my human bluntness. I'm counting on it. We've needed someone to shake things up for decades. And I'm going to want to redesign half your systems because they're inefficient. Please do. And I'm going to fall completely in love with you, probably embarrassingly fast, and then I'm going to be devastated when my mortality catches up with me and you're still here, unchanged, and I'm old and dying. Dorian caught her face in his hands, forced her to meet his eyes. Then we'll have that problem in 60 years, together, and we'll solve it the way we solve everything else, with brilliance, determination, and a complete disregard for what's supposed to be possible. You really think we can make this work? I think we already are. She kissed him again, deeper this time, and felt the last of her reservations fall away. This was madness. This was impossible. This was the best decision she'd ever made. When she finally left the tunnels, dawn was breaking over the city. Brynn emerged from a different access point, one that led out near her apartment building, and stood for a moment just breathing the cold morning air. Her phone buzzed with messages. Her supervisor confirming she had the day off, her best friend asking where she'd been, a notification from the city's infrastructure monitoring system showing all grids nominal, all systems stable, and a new message from an unknown number. When you're ready, knock 3 times on the red door in Voss Alley. I'll be waiting. Brynn smiled, pocketed the phone, and headed home to shower and sleep and pretend for a few hours that her life was normal. But she knew she'd be back in those tunnels before the day was out, because normal was overrated, and she'd found something better. She'd found purpose. She'd found belonging. She'd found a vampire king who looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. and she'd fallen in love with the darkness. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Days above ground, working her regular shifts, maintaining the city's power grid. Evenings in the tunnels, managing the interface between the human city and the vampire court, learning systems and protocols and the intricate politics of immortal society. And nights, the deep nights, when both worlds quieted, belonged to Dorian. He courted her exactly as promised, taking her to hidden places in the city. A speakeasy from the Prohibition era that still operated for those who knew the password. A garden on a rooftop that bloomed only at night, tended by vampires with centuries of horticultural knowledge. A museum after hours, empty except for them and the art. "I've lived here my whole life," Brynn said during one such outing, standing before a painting she'd never seen before. "How did I not know about any of this?" "Because you were living one city, and I another." Dorian stood beside her, close enough that she felt the cold radiating from him. "Now you live in both." "It's strange, feeling like a tourist in my own home." "Is it uncomfortable?" She considered. "No, it's exciting. Like I'm seeing everything with new eyes." "That's how I feel when I'm with you. Centuries-old places become new again because you're experiencing them for the first time." Brynn turned to look at him, this vampire king who'd somehow become the center of her world. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say things that should be cheesy but somehow aren't." He smiled. "Practice. I've had a very long time to perfect my romantic declarations." "Have you used them on other people?" "Would you believe me if I said no?" "Probably not." "Then yes, I've used them, but never meant them the way I mean them with you." He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're the first person in a century who's made me want to try. Really try. Not just for a night or a year, but for however long this life allows. Even though I'm mortal? Especially because you're mortal. You remind me what it means to live in the present, not just exist through the centuries." She kissed him there in the empty museum, surrounded by art and history and the weight of time. And when they broke apart, she said the words she'd been holding back for weeks. "I love you." Dorian's expression shifted through surprise into something that looked like joy. "You're certain?" "I'm an engineer. I don't say things I'm not certain about." "Then I love you too, Brynn Lawson. More than I thought I was still capable of loving." They stood there, holding each other in the darkness, and Brynn felt the last piece of her new life click into place. 3 months after the night she'd climbed to Substation 17's roof and met a vampire king, the city experienced another blackout. But this time, Brynn was ready. She was in her control room beneath the city when the alerts started coming in. Not sabotage this time, just a transformer failure, the kind of thing that happened occasionally despite best maintenance, but the location was problematic right above one of the court's secondary chambers. "I've got it," she told Lucian, who'd appeared at her shoulder. "Get everyone away from that section. I'm going to reroute power around the failure and trigger a controlled shutdown of the local grid." "How long?" "Give me 10 minutes. She worked fast, fingers flying across keyboards and tablets, executing the procedures she'd developed for exactly this kind of situation. The grid responded beautifully, power flowing through alternate paths, the damaged section going dark without affecting the rest of the city. "Done," she said, sitting back. "The city won't even notice. They'll just see a scheduled maintenance outage on their end." "You're remarkable," Lucian said, shaking his head. "We survived for centuries, but we were always reacting. You've made us proactive." "That's the difference between hiding and integrating. You're part of the city now, really part of it. My job is to make sure that stays true." Dorian entered the control room, immediately crossing to her side. I felt the power shift. "Everything all right?" "Everything's perfect. Just a minor failure, easily handled." He studied the screens, the data flows she'd been managing. "You've transformed this court in such a short time. I've just given you better tools. You've given us hope." He touched her shoulder, gentle and familiar. "The court votes tonight on making your liaison position permanent and official. I wanted you to know." Brynn's heart jumped. "Official?" "With full membership in the court, access to all resources, and a voice in our governance, if you accept." "I'm human." "Which is exactly why we need your voice. We've spent too long isolated, thinking only of our own kind. You remind us daily that there's a larger world, and we're part of it. She thought about it, about the weight of responsibility, the complexity of belonging to two worlds, about the impossibility of what she'd found here in the darkness beneath the city. When's the vote? Midnight. Then I accept, if they'll have me. The vote was unanimous. Brynn stood before the assembled court, hundreds of vampires who'd come to witness this unprecedented moment, and listened as Dorian formally welcomed her into the court of deepening night. Not as a vampire, but as a human. As herself. This is a new chapter for us, Dorian said, his voice carrying through the chamber. For centuries we've hidden from the human world, existing in shadow and secrecy. But the world changes, and we must change with it. Brynn Lawson represents that change. She is our bridge, our translator, our connection to the city above. And she is, as of tonight, one of us. The court erupted in applause, and Brynn felt tears threaten. She'd never been good with ceremonies, with public recognition. But this felt right. Felt like coming home to a place she'd never known she was missing. Afterward, in Dorian's private chamber, she let the emotions out. I can't believe I'm crying, she said, wiping at her eyes. This is stupid. This is human, Dorian corrected, pulling her into his arms, and I love you for it. I'm going to get your shirt wet. I have others. She laughed through the tears, buried her face in his chest. What do we do now? Now, we live, we work. We build the future together, one day at a time. What about the vampire thing? Immortality? Dorian was quiet for a moment. That's your choice. If you ever want it, I can make it happen, but there's no pressure, no expectation. You're perfect exactly as you are. Even though I'll age and die? Even then, he tilted her chin up, met her eyes. Though I confess, the thought of eternity with you is appealing. Let me think about it. It's kind of a big decision. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. They stayed like that, holding each other in the quiet, until Brynn's exhaustion caught up with her and she fell asleep in his arms. A year passed. Brynn's life settled into something that would have seemed impossible that night on the substation roof. She kept her job with the city, was even promoted to senior engineer, but everyone knew her real work happened after hours. The liaison role consumed most of her time, managing the increasingly complex relationship between the human city and the vampire court. How more humans learned about the court's existence, carefully selected individuals in positions of power who could help smooth the way. A city council member here, a police captain there, building a network of allies who understood that the vampires were part of the city's fabric, not a threat to it. And through it all, Dorian was her constant. They grew closer as the months passed, learning each other's rhythms and quirks. She taught him about modern technology, about systems thinking and network theory. He taught her about history, about the long view of time, about patience and perspective. They fought occasionally, usually about her tendency to work too hard and his tendency to be overprotective. But they always resolved it, usually with long conversations that stretched into dawn and left them both feeling closer. I've been thinking, Brynn said one night, lying in bed in Dorian's chamber, about the vampire thing. She felt him tense beside her. And? I'm not ready yet, but I think someday I will be. She turned to face him. I want to do this right. Finish my projects above ground, make sure my family understands why I'm making this choice, prepare properly. But yeah, someday. I want forever with you. Dorian's expression was pure joy. You're certain? I love you. I love this life. I love both my worlds. And I don't want to lose any of it. She touched his face. So yeah, eventually, when I'm ready, make me like you. It's not an easy transition. Nothing worth doing is easy. You taught me that. He kissed her, deep and thorough, and Brynn felt the future open up before them like a flower blooming in the dark. 2 years after that night on the roof, the city dedicated a new power substation. It was state-of-the-art, incorporating design principles that Brynn had pioneered, built on a site that secretly connected to the tunnel court below. At the dedication ceremony, attended by politicians and engineers and city officials, Brynn stood beside her supervisor and explained the innovations they'd implemented. Distributed systems, adaptive networks, resilient design that could handle anything the modern world threw at it. What she didn't mention was the secondary purpose of the facility, a direct feed to the court, ensuring they'd never again risk exposure through power failures. Dorian watched from the shadows at the edge of the crowd, unable to attend in daylight but present nonetheless. She caught his eye once, saw his smile, and had to suppress her own. After the ceremony, she went home to her apartment. She'd kept it, a foothold in the surface world she refused to give up, and found a package waiting. Inside was a key, old and ornate, and a note in Dorian's elegant handwriting. "For the nights you want to come home to me, our chamber is yours, always. D." She held the key, feeling its weight, and made a decision. That night she descended into the tunnels and found Dorian in their chamber. She thought of it as theirs now, not just his. "I'm ready," she said. He looked up from his book. "For?" "For forever. For this. For you." She set down her bag, which contained everything she thought she might need for the transition. "Turn me. Make me vampire. Make me yours in every way." Dorian stood slowly. "You've thought this through?" "For 2 years, I've said my goodbyes to the sun, made arrangements for my surface life, prepared everything. I'm ready. It will hurt. I know. You'll lose things. The ability to walk in daylight, to age naturally, to have children. I know. And I've made my peace with it." She crossed to him, took his hands. "I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing forever." He searched her face, looking for doubt, found only certainty. "Then yes," he said quietly, "I'll give you everything I am, everything we can be." The turning was agony and ecstasy, pain and transformation. Dorian's bite was precise, draining her to the edge of death, and then his blood on her lips cold and electric and tasting of eternity. Brynn fell into darkness and emerged changed. Her senses sharpened until she could hear heartbeats in the city above, could see in the darkness like it was noon. Her body strengthened, became something more than human, and when she looked in the mirror, she saw white skin and hair the color of winter, eyes that had shifted to silver. She looked like she belonged. Dorian held her through the first hours, explaining what she was feeling, helping her adjust to the overwhelming input. And when she'd steadied, when she could think clearly again, he asked the question, "Do you regret it?" Brynn looked at herself, at him, at the world she could now perceive in all its hidden complexity. Not even a little bit. The years blurred together after that, time moving differently when you had eternity to work with. Brynn remained the court's liaison, but now she could move through both worlds more easily, attend night meetings with human officials and day councils with the vampire court. She became something unprecedented, a bridge not just between species, but between ways of living. Her innovations in infrastructure spread throughout the city and eventually to other cities where vampire courts existed. The model of integration she'd pioneered became a template, proof that humans and vampires could coexist if they simply chose to see each other. Dorian ruled his court with wisdom, deepened by love, and Brynn stood beside him, his partner in every way. They faced challenges. There were always those who resisted change, who preferred the old ways of hiding and separation. But together, they built something new. 5 years after her turning, the court voted to formalize Brynn's position even further. She became co-regent, sharing power with Dorian, the first human-turned-vampire to hold such a position. "How does it feel?" Dorian asked after the ceremony, as they stood in their control room watching the city's lights spread across the night. "Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Brynn replied. "Like everything that happened, the blackout, meeting you, all of it was leading here." "Do you miss the sun?" She considered. It was the question she'd asked herself countless times in the first years. "Sometimes. But I've gained so much more. And the night is beautiful too, in ways I never appreciated when I was human." "You can still walk in daylight," Dorian reminded her, "with protection for short periods. We've developed the technology." "I know, but I don't need it. This is my world now. Our world." He pulled her close, and they stood together in the darkness, looking out over the city they protected. 10 years after that night on the substation roof, Brynn stood in the same spot, looking down at the transformer that had started everything. It had been upgraded multiple times since then, part of the ever-evolving infrastructure she managed. But she came back here sometimes when she needed to remember where it all began. Dorian appeared beside her, silent as thought. Feeling nostalgic? Feeling grateful, she corrected. That night I was exhausted, burned out, ready to quit this job, maybe the city entirely. And then I climbed up here and found you. I was preparing to watch my court die. And then a human engineer appeared and saw solutions where we saw only endings. We saved each other. We did. Brynn turned to him, took his hand. Do you remember what I said that first night? When I was so tired I could barely think straight? You said many things. I asked you to take me somewhere beautiful, and you flew me over the city until dawn. I remember. His smile was soft. It was the moment I knew I was falling in love with you. Want to do it again? We've done it 100 times since then. So make it 101. Dorian laughed, swept her into his arms, and launched them both off the substation roof into the night. They soared over the sleeping city, between buildings and above streets, the grid glowing beneath them like a circuit board of light. But this time, Brynn wasn't exhausted. She was energized, alive in ways she'd never been as a human. This time, she could see everything. The flow of power through the lines she managed, the hidden entrances to the court below, the secret life of the city she'd come to know so well. And this time, when dawn approached, she didn't need to hide. She and Dorian descended together to their chamber, to their life, to the future they were building one night at a time. I love you, she said as they touched down. I love you too, Dorian replied, for now and always. They walked hand in hand into the tunnels, into their home, into the beautiful darkness they'd chosen together. And somewhere above them, the city woke to a new day, its power flowing steady and strong, maintained by systems that connected worlds and bridged the gap between human and vampire, mortality and eternity, ending and beginning. Brynn's grid, humming with purpose, holding everything together, just like she'd always known it could.